this is Adam Ross with Florida Tennis and also the Bleacher Brothers Sports Network. We are very, very blessed today. And I use that word for a reason, and we'll find out a little bit later why I use that word. We have the great former ATP player and current radio host David Wheaton with us. David, thank you so very much for taking your time from your family to be here tonight. How are you, sir?
Adam, I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me on your program tonight.
Well, thank you so much. I should begin by letting you know that in researching you to get ready for the show, um, I found that your accomplishments off the court, don't take this the wrong way, but I think they may have dwarfed and gone beyond your accomplishments on the court. You were a great player, but I was incredibly impressed with what I found, and I would say three main themes of your life, which this may be presumptuous, but I found family, faith, and praying it forward. Are those three significant things for you?
I would say very much. Matter of fact, I'd say faith is number one, family is number two. I didn't catch the third one, but
Paying it forward,
paying it forward, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right about the word blessed. I feel like a very blessed person to have been involved in tennis and for all those years and to play on the professional tour. That was certainly a highlight of my life to be involved in the great sport of tennis. Started playing when I was just about 4 or 5 years old. I was the youngest of four kids. We were fortunate enough to have two public tennis courts just down the street from where my parents lived. And so I grew up, my older siblings played, and so I was kind of like the ball boy early on and played hockey in the winter like a good Minnesota boy and tennis in the summer. And my two-handed backhand was always my best shot because that was converted over from hockey where I was left-handed. So, just had a dream as a young boy about being a professional tennis player. I used to watch Wimbledon on TV and early on the mornings in America, and had a dream early on and played local tournaments, national, and then graduated into down to the Bolletary Tennis Academy halfway through my sophomore year. Went off to college at Stanford and turned pro when I was 19 and played for 13 years on the tour. So very blessed to be a part of the game. From the faith aspect, though, Adam, I grew up as a professing Christian, grew up in a Christian home. My parents had a very authentic faith. They didn't just kind of live it out on Christmas and Easter. They were authentic people
Sure.
and made a profession of faith early on. But as I got into my teenage years and early 20s, early years on the tennis tour, wasn't going the right way. Making maybe you could describe it as me being on the throne of my own life and not going the way that God wanted me to go. And I was conflicted over this because I knew the right way and I wasn't living that way. And so early in my tennis career, my early 20s, I won a big tournament in Germany called the Grand Slam Cup, and I had such a sense of emptiness and a lack of fulfillment after winning that big tournament. Here was a big event and a lot of money and all the things that I was chasing after, but maybe wouldn't have admitted it at the time. And that led me to a process of starting to read the Bible for the first time when I was in my mid 20s, around 24 years old, and coming to understand things that I had never really read before or understood before, primarily just the gospel, the good news that God created me to know Him, to worship Him, to follow Him in life, and I wasn't doing that. And I was actually sinning against God. And I realized the consequence for doing that. But then I read the good news about how Christ came to pay the penalty that I deserved to pay for my sin. And there's a swap that took place. He takes my sin, He gives me His righteousness. And when I repented and believed in that gospel when I was 24, Adam, that really changed my life. I didn't become some perfect person. I'm not a perfect person today at all. I have plenty of faults that I strive to overcome. But that changed my life. I was born again, as Jesus said. And it really changed the whole direction of my life. And again, not some perfectly holy, righteous person at all, but at least I understand and can put my head in the pillow at night, just understanding that I'm striving to live for the purpose for which God created me.
Well, I wanted to actually, you kind of segued into this for me, but to talk about family a little bit, I wanted to congratulate you again, to you and your family, for winning the Ralph W. Westcott USTA Family of the Year Award at the 2025 USTA Annual Meeting and Conference. Um, just so people know, the Ralph W. Westcott USTA Family of the Year Award was created by the USTA in 1965, and it's given annually to a family that volunteers to promote amateur tennis. And the award emphasizes the theme that tennis is a family game. And I was lucky enough to meet you there, and you were gracious enough to agree to be on the show. I want to tell our listeners and viewers that the award was presented by Brian Vahaley, the USTA president and chairman of the board, and he said this about your family. The USTA is proud to recognize the Wheaton family for their incredible dedication to the sport and lasting impact on the tennis community. Tennis in Minnesota wouldn't be what it is today without their nearly century-long commitment, a generational legacy that has touched countless lives both locally and beyond. And then the presentation by the USDA noted that the Wheaton name is synonymous with tennis in Minnesota, with four generations of tennis players impacting the sport for decades. John Hesse moved to Minnesota in the 1930s and taught his daughter Mary Jane tennis at a young age. Mary Jane, the matriarch of the Wheaton family, and her husband Bruce passed tennis along to their four children, Marnie, Mark, John, and David. Your thoughts, if you'd be so kind, as to what that meant to you and your family to receive that amazing award this year.
Yeah, I don't think that we could have received another award that was more meaningful to us as a family because this is what my parents and my grandparents really cultivated was family growing up. You mentioned my grandfather, John Hesse. He was a unique person. He lived to the age of nearly 102. He
Wow.
learned tennis after he finished his business career in his 60s. And then he taught it to my mom, Mary Jane, and then she taught it, or my grandfather, my mom taught it to my older siblings, and then my mom and my siblings taught me. And then there's another generation after us who have been very accomplished players and teachers now too. So there really has been four generations and so this is what my family cultivated was a close family. We were always together. As a matter of fact, we're still together today, which is it wasn't really intentional, but this is the way it is that we all live within about 10 or 15 minutes of each other. Matter of fact, my entire family, except for me, I live about 10 minutes away from the neighborhood where everyone else lives.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
my mother's in the same house. My dad went to heaven a couple of years ago, but my
Sorry.
mom's still in the same house where I grew up. And she's 91 years old now. And
Wow.
we one of us goes over there every night basically to give her dinner and spend some time with her. So we have a close family. That is a blessing. And again, not a perfect family, but this is what my parents cultivated. So I just want to thank the USTA for honoring us in this way with this award because it couldn't have been more meaningful to give us this award. And also, I want a special mention to a woman in our section named Marcia Bach. Maybe you know her. She's well known not only here, but also within the national community of the USTA. She has been such a supporter, and she just loves our family. And she was the one who nominated for this us for this award in the northern section, and then went to the national meeting just recently. So, yeah, just very blessed for this award, and thankful that God saw fit that to put me in a family that was a good, healthy family. I know that's not the case for everyone, and just thankful for that that we were able to receive this award.
Well, that is, again, congratulations. And talking a little bit more about your family, I just noted, and you can update this, but you and your wife, Brody, met at a young age, were best friends long before became husband and wife. Brody worked for nearly 15 years as a medical office manager for Lakeside Sports and Pain Clinic. You enjoy raising your son and I saw two Labradors. You noted that you're thankful for your faith in Christ, your family, and living near where you grew up, which you've mentioned, um, and that you and your family are active members in good standing of a local church in Minnesota. And is that accurate? Do we have that up to date?
Accurate except for two Labradors.
Okay. Is
We
that
just have one now. We
okay?
just have one now. But yeah, Brody and I did meet when we were very young,
Sure.
when I was 8 and she was 5. And her parents,
Wow.
unfortunately, went through a difficult divorce
Sorry to hear that.
when she was just 13. And so my family, particularly my father, really helped their family, and her specifically was almost like a father to her growing up. And so we were really good friends all along. She was a bit younger than I am. When I was a senior in high school, she was an eighth grader. It's a bit, maybe too big of a difference. And it
Sure.
was almost maybe a little more brother sister like for me.
Sure.
But we were good friends throughout our 20s, and just through providential circumstances, by the time I got into my 30s, I was unmarried, and just came to the conclusion that this is what God had for me, to be married. And so we started to get together and talk more about what that would look like. And we married when I just turned 40 years old. So I married late.
Sure.
Unfortunately, by the way, wish we had been married when I was, 24 and 20, but
Sure.
that wasn't the plan. And we're blessed to
Sure.
have a son who is nearly 12 years old named Tommy, and just a good boy. And so, I live a pretty straightforward family life up here in Minnesota now. I don't travel nearly as much as I used to. I host a weekly radio program for the last 20 some years called the Christian Worldview. It's part of a nonprofit foundation called the Overcomer Foundation, which does radio broadcasts, does in-person events. We do written and audio and video resources and so forth. So, very thankful and find it fulfilling, just where I am at this point in my life, and know that there's work for me to do personally, but trying to go day by day down the narrow road.
And before we jump into tennis, I just had one more note here that you wrote a book about losing a
Yeah.
Labrador, My Boy Ben, A Story of Love, Loss, and Grace in 2014. And I just noted it's My Boy Ben is the true and touching story of David Wheaton's close companionship with an unforgettable yellow lab named Ben. And the journey begins with you pursuing your dream on professional tennis tour, facing the reality uh, that you had a desire to get a dog and that it wouldn't be possible when you're on the road for months on end. And then you got a surprising letter. I think I'm telling the whole book here. It's a spoiler alert. Under your hotel room door in a faraway country changed everything, and you returned home to meet a puppy. And unfortunately, it ends as unfortunately a lot of I have a pet stories too, with the loss, the unbelievably painful loss that we all go through. So, can you talk a little bit about that journey and writing that book and what that all meant to you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you did your show prep well to
Oh,
to
thank
know
you,
about all these
thank you,
things. So
thank you,
good job on that. Yeah, I've
thank
written
you.
two books. The first was University of Destruction, Your Game Plan for Spiritual Victory on Campus. That came out in 2005. That's to help students make a successful transition to college. The second book, My Boy Ben, that you've been talking about, is more of a memoir over a certain period of my life, from let's say my late 20s into my late 30s. And the book is about a yellow lab that I had named Ben, I was single at the time and very close. Just, I loved to pheasant hunt, and he was sort of my constant companion for a lot of years. And then when he wasn't very old, it wasn't even 9, he all of a sudden got cancer and died. And I was crushed at the time. I think as any dog lover knows what that feels like. It's a crushing thing. Loss is hard, no matter whether you lose a dog or even more difficult losses beyond that, losing a loved one.
Sure,
But it was in the midst of that I began to really experience God's grace in our most difficult losses, or the trials of life. We all experience trials of life. And so I lose Ben halfway through the book, but there's another half or a third of the book to go, where it's a good news book
sure,
about in
good,
our most difficult trials, God's grace, which is his supernatural power, enablement, perspective, strength, comfort, to be able to not avoid trials because we all go through them, but to be able to have the right perspective and to have the strength to be able to go through them, and actually have him do the work he needs to do inside of us through those trials. So it's a book about a yellow Labrador, yes. It's a book about tennis, because there's a lot of tennis in the book because
sure.
I was on the tour at the time. It's a book about family, and it's a book about God's grace. So it was a very meaningful project to be a part of that book at a great publisher here in Minnesota. And yeah, that was a special part of my life, writing that book.
Well, coincidentally, and we're going to get to this later, but I know this is going to sound strange, but there is a Florida tennis connection to the book University of Destruction, believe it or not. So we are going to get to that a little later on in the
Okay.
podcast because I was shocked to see that connection myself, to be honest with you. So we'll get to it, but I'm going to go through a little tennis now. Okay, just three quick ATP career facts. You're on the ATP tour for 13 years from 1988 to 2001, and you can, confirm if any. Oh, just let me know if any of these are wrong. You reach the semifinals or better in singles or doubles of every major tournament, and I call them majors. Some people call them Grand Slams, but the Grand Slams are obviously a Grand Slam is if you win all four, as you know. So I call them majors, and then you had a career high singles world ranking of number 12 in 1991. So hopefully I've got those correct. Those sound right? Just
Yes,
okay.
that's correct.
All right. Thanks. Okay. Now in a lot of my shows, I show parts of my tennis collection, and I do want to show part of the David Wheaton collection a little bit here. Okay.
Uh,
This is the Net
okay.
Pro card from 1990. Okay. And this is the Wild card from 1995. These, I think, were produced in Australia. You've probably seen these, I'm sure, these cards.
I have. I have.
But
You're
but
missing the NHL hockey card, though.
this is my favorite card, the NHL hockey card right here.
Okay, good.
This is my favorite card, and I have to tell our audience a little bit about this card. It's produced by the NHL, and this is the front, and it's the 1992 Minnesota North Star Celebrity Captain card. And just for background, the Minnesota North Stars were in the NHL from 1967 to 1993. They got to the Stanley Cup Finals twice. They moved to Dallas. I hope I can say that after the 1992-1993 season. I love this card, and here's why. First of all, the photo has you in like ready position to return serve. Okay, like you look ready to go. But it also has the iconic David Wheaton American flag patriotic headband. Um, so before we go any further, what was the origin of the headband? How did that come about that you were wearing these headbands?
Well, first of all, the origin was I had hair back then. That was the first prerequisite to wearing a headband.
I'm not taking this hat
Um,
off.
no, I always wore a headband when I was a junior and into college and so forth. And it was during the Gulf War. So we're really dating ourselves or myself here, going back to
Same
the
here.
Minnesota North Stars, who are not even
Yeah.
a team anymore in
Right.
Minnesota. But anyway, but the headband started during the Gulf War in the early 90s. Have always been very patriotic. I love our
Sure.
country. I love America. And just wore that in support of our troops and country and military and so forth back then, and just sort of stuck with it. There was not much more to the story than that, but just love to see the American colors.
No, it's great because my memory or vision of David Wheaton is this headband. Like, you think of Pat Cash with his checker headband. I always think David Wheaton American flag headband. One of the things I love about cards is that they usually have something interesting to say on the back. Sometimes they're kind of interesting. I have to read to our audience just what this says. David Wheaton, celebrity captain, the athletic career of one of the top professional tennis players in this world began when David Wheaton, celebrity captain of the Minnesota North Stars, put on a pair of hockey skates at the age of 2. As he matured, however, development of a deadly two-handed backhand and a powerful serve foretold a successful future in tennis. Wheaton's semifinal showing at Wimbledon and $2 million Grand Slam Cup championship have made the young star the envy of many veterans. And that's what it says on the back of this card. So you can learn a lot. Sometimes it's not accurate, but you can learn a lot about players from this. And do you
Yeah,
remember this card? Obviously you do because you mentioned it.
I do. I
Okay.
do remember. Matter of fact, I think I still have some. And surprisingly enough, even at in my mid 50s now, people still send me things to sign. And so I'll see those cards every once in a while, the NHL cards, and it makes me look back fondly. I always loved hockey. I grew up playing it. I actually still play a little bit today in the winter, just casually. But I played hockey even before I started playing tennis. I started when I was barely walking. That's what Minnesota boys do.
Well, we're getting to that. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about your early memories of tennis. You started playing at age 4. You won your first title at age 8. Do you remember winning that title at age 8? Remember that match at all?
Mm, I don't know if I remember that. I'll tell you, I do remember though that the first tournament I played was a local kind of a club
Okay.
tournament here in Minnesota, and it was a 12 and under event. I think I
Mhm.
was around 8 years old, and I had to play. There was only four boys in the tournament, and I had to play my best friend in the
Oh,
first round, which was the semifinals. So introduction to a competition there, and I beat my best friend there. But then in the final, I was playing a 12-year-old, and I lost. I think it was an 8 game pro set or something, and
wow.
I was so competitive at the time, and I
Really?
so hated to lose that instead of going up to the net to shake hands afterwards, the customary handshake, I just
Yeah.
turned around on my heel and walked back to the back fence and sat
Wow.
down and refused
Wow.
to shake hands. I wasn't going to accept defeat. And there's this great picture of my best friend who had beaten the semis coming out with my favorite drink at the time, which was a grape crush. And he's standing over me, giving me the grape crush, trying to negotiate or persuade me to go shake hands with
Sure.
my the victor. And I ended up doing that, and my sportsmanship hopefully improved after that. But that was an early memory of competition for me.
That is awesome. And then you won the Minnesota State high school tennis title, correct?
Yes, when I was
Okay.
in ninth grade, so I started
Okay.
playing high school tennis here in seventh grade, and
Okay.
won the high school title in ninth grade, and then the next year, halfway through my 10th grade year, is when Nick Bollettieri had invited me to come down to start training at his academy in Bradenton.
It's like we set this up perfect timing. I'm going to show you and our audience the
Okay.
iconic photo. And it's so iconic that tennis historian Joel Drucker did a whole article about this photo. And for those, I'll just show. Well, I've showed it, and we have in that photo Andre Agassi, Martin Blackman, you, Jim Courier, and of course the legendary Nick Bollettieri. And again, credit to Joel Drucker because he quoted you as saying, "We were the inevitables, at least in our minds." Inevitable as in determined and destined to be the answer to the question repeatedly being asked at the time, where is the next generation of American tennis pros? In our minds, it was not a matter of if, but when we would barge through the door. And then Nick said, David was a person that never bragged. He had an all around game, and even though his mother wasn't there literally, she was there watching over him. And then a very reflective David Wheaton said, to go a little deeper at the time of this photo, I was resisting who God created me to be, a worshiper of Him. But God would use His time and the years that followed to bring me to my senses and understand my need to be right with Him and the peace that would result. Having a 7-year-old son now, which is then, this photo holds memories and lessons, both positive and negative, to try to pass on to him. That's a heavy statement. So, can you talk? I knew this was a big picture, so talk a little bit more about that if you don't mind, what this all means at this point.
Yeah, that photograph was taken in New York before the U.S. Open. When we were all juniors at the time. We were practicing on a private court, I think, in upstate New York. It was taken by Nick's son, Jimmy Bollettieri, who
Sure.
was a wonderful friend over the years. He's a great photographer, and he was down at the Bollettieri Academy when I was there, and those other guys were there. So it sort of um, captured the moment, that era of all of us coming up, practicing and competing against each other, and about to launch out on the professional tennis tour. So great memories in that photo, and something that I see often. Matter of fact, I think I have a picture that the same picture that Nick signed right here in my den here in Minnesota. And Nick, it was hard to lose Nick a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He made such an impact on my tennis and really my life in his generosity and inviting me down to his academy when I was in my high school years. And I firmly believe that if I hadn't gone down there and practicing against the guys in that picture, Agassi and Courier and Blackman, and there were others like Chris Garner and other professionals there, and just the world of tennis that opened up to me, the training, the coaching, the weather. it just opened up a lot of doors for me. So I'm just will be always thankful to Nick for the help he gave me in my development.
Yeah, Nick Bolter, an absolute legend. I interacted with him a number of times and just amazing. Every time I heard him speak, you're ready to run through a wall for him, and I'm not even playing.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. Junior US Open title in 1987, obviously a huge deal. Then you go on to Stanford, and one of the other people that inspired me when when I heard him speak was Dick Gould.
Mm-hmm.
He has this book, Anatomy of a Champion, which I have to recommend. It is so inspirational. It's when he goes back and a lot of his players talk about him, and I think it's signed by the Bryan brothers, who wrote Never Satisfied. Um, the impact. Oh, and you helped Stanford win the NCAA title in 1988. You received the Block S Award as the most outstanding freshman athlete at Stanford. Probably lifelong friendships like Patrick McEnroe. I know you go on to win a doubles title with him. So tell us about your Dick Gould and Stanford and what that experience was like for you.
Well, Dick Gould's another one like Nick, who I am just very, very eternally grateful for um, inviting me to come to Stanford, to playing on the team. He was an excellent coach for me. I really credit him with taking my game. I was an aggressive, big serving baseliner when I went to college, and he really converted me into much more of a net rushing serve and volley player. And his signal for me all the time was get to net. You know, on the first after the first serve, after the second serve, on the second serve return, get in, and that really fit uh, my body style, and I think that really made a big difference. But he was an incredible coach. You know, I think what was it, 17 NCAA titles, the
Incredible.
longevity there. It's amazing. Um, a coach is such an important role in society and life, leading young men on that team. And he just had a special expertise and way about him that was able to do that and to help his teams peak in time for the NCAA. So, yeah, Dick Gould is an amazing man, and will always be grateful for the impact he had in my life.
I remember asking him what it was like to win those titles, and he immediately corrected me and said, "I didn't win those titles. My team won those titles." It's like, oh, okay, right
Sounds like
there.
Dick.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, yeah. Three career titles. You win your first 1990 U.S. clay courts in South Carolina. Can you describe the feeling of winning that first title, what it all meant to you at the time?
Yeah, it was the U.S. clay courts, and it was in Kiowa Island. It was somewhat surprising to win my first title on clay,
I was going to say
but
clay, but okay.
but
Amazing.
actually I always loved playing on
Oh,
clay,
okay.
surprisingly enough, because I grew up in Minnesota playing occasionally on green clay, and then of course down at Bolletari's Academy we played on clay. So in Florida, a lot of clay courts. So I wasn't unfamiliar with the surface at all. And in some ways, as a tall guy who wasn't the quickest player, it allows you a little more time to get to the ball. Used to love practicing on clay, so much easier on the body than hard courts.
Sure,
But yeah, that was a big moment in 1990, winning your first title. It's sort of a validation
sure.
that, when I left college, there was no guarantee that you're going to make it. And I only went to 1 year of college, and it's sort of sink or swim now in the tennis tour. So getting out in the tour at
Sure,
the
sure.
middle of the 88 and then working my way up and then winning that title, that gave me a lot of confidence going forward that this career is something that I can do and win tournaments. And so that was a great memory to win a first title one of our U.S. championship events too.
Well, in 1990, you also got into the U.S. Open doubles finals with Paul Annacone, and I thought to myself, after meeting you and reading about you, that wow, what an analytical, thoughtful team that must have been. You and Paul Annacone analyzing a match must have been like, I don't even know if you were doing it back in the day, if you were thinking about it that much, but wow, what a thought process must have gone into those matches.
Yeah, he was an incredible player, but particularly doubles player. His serve and volley game, his
Right.
hands. You're right. He strategically. He was older than I was. I was a younger guy at the time. He was a veteran, and he really led our team well, and we had some really good results together, and that was one of them. And also that same U.S. Open, I lost to McEnroe in the quarters of the singles at the U.S. Open that year, and that was a memorable
Wow.
match. Wish I could have won it, but he was a tough player, and
Sure.
playing him in his home stadium, so to
Yep.
speak, was a great memory back at the U.S. Open that year. But so yeah, those were great memories, and ones that I sometimes even still think about today.
What's it like playing Johnny Mac at the U.S. Open? I can't even imagine the buzz, the feeling, looking around. What is that like?
Well, this was at the time, Adam, when they had the locker rooms for the U.S. Open were in an indoor center.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't within the same stadium. Arthur Ashe Stadium wasn't there at that point.
Okay.
And so it was an evening match too. So a night match at the Open, there's always the extra energy. And I remember
Sure.
walking through the crowd. You had to walk right through the
Oh,
crowd
that's
from the
awesome.
indoor building locker room through the grounds and then into the stadium. And it was an incredible experience. Just McEnroe, of course, has the personality and being a New Yorker and so forth. I knew it was going to be a difficult situation for me. I played pretty well. I think I lost in 4 sets, but he's a tough player,
Sure.
obviously.
Yeah.
Just his ball comes off his racket differently than a lot of players, kind of like Connors. They don't put a lot of topspin in the ball, doesn't bounce up a lot. Very accurate with his serve. Of course, great volleyer, great on his feet, and great competitor and so forth. So yeah, it was a great honor to be in the quarterfinals. I wish I could have won it, but it was not meant to be that night. But a great experience nonetheless.
So I think McEnroe said he never hit the same ball to a player twice. Was one thing he tried not to do. And I remember he said just fairly recently, I heard him say that doesn't matter if you win or lose until you lose. I thought that was a pretty good quote. Totally Johnny Mac,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
1991 is an astounding year for David Wheaton. You reached the semifinals of singles at Wimbledon. You beat Peter Korda, whose son Sebi Korda is a great American player right now. Cedric Pioline, Yvonne Lendl, Jan Gunnarsson, Andre Agassi in the quarters before you're knocked out by Boris Becker. You also you're also doubles runner up at the Australian Open, partnering Patrick McEnroe. But getting back to that Wimbledon run, what stands out for you? That form? Were you just in the zone? Were you seeing a beach ball out there? What was going on?
I think that would probably be the most memorable tournament of my career, even though I didn't win it.
Sure,
Um, I always dreamed about playing at Wimbledon. I love the U.S. Open too, but there was something, maybe the tradition, the center court. Who knows? Maybe it's in a foreign country, Britain. I'm not sure what it was. The grass courts, whatever it was, it just was very attractive, as it is to a lot of players. I'm not the only one, and my game was suited really well for grass, serve and volley. Back then, I think the grass was a little different than it is today. The
sure.
ball skidded more, stayed down more, so it was very favorable for a serve and volley player like I was. And so I really would get to Wimbledon and just feel like this is, the time to put everything into it and
Sure.
focus and just enjoy the moment and do as well as you can. There's just a ever extra level, maybe of adrenaline or whatever it is, excitement, enthusiasm to be there. And so I had a really tough draw, actually. You mentioned some of
Yes.
the players I played from Corda and Peeling and Lendl, and then I think Agassi, or maybe I can't remember if it was Lendl that year. But anyway, I had a tough
Yeah.
draw,
It was
and
Lendl. And then
yeah, and
Agassi.
so
Yeah. With Jan Gunnarsson mixed in there.
sometimes,
Sorry.
right, and sometimes as a player has a tougher draw, you realize, well, you got to do this. There's not going to
Sure.
be any walkovers here. So maybe
Sure.
that's the mentality I had. But the match against Lendl on center court, playing on center court was just phenomenal. Of course,
Wow.
no place like it. Maybe some of those who love Arthur Ashe Stadium would disagree, but I just love that center court there. And playing Agassi, I was winning fairly handily the first set and a half, And then I was losing very handily the next two and a half sets and almost out of the match. And Agassi would go on to win Wimbledon the next year. But at that time, no one thought that grass was going to be his surface. But was in a very difficult fourth set, almost down two breaks, and probably going to be shaking hands on the losing end. And I think I was down love 40 on my serve or something, and able to kind of crawl back and win that set. And then I won the fifth set, and just a great memory. And playing Becker in the semifinals, he had been obviously maybe won Wimbledon a couple of times at that point, and difficult player to play there, just with his serve and
Sure.
his physical attributes and so forth. I lost that match, but it was a great memory of just reaching the latter stages of a major, but particularly Wimbledon, and just so many good memories of that particular tournament.
It's an interesting year for you because it's same year you with your former Stanford teammate Patrick McEnroe, you're in the finals of the Aussie Open, the finals of the Hopman Cup, and then it culminates in you have your career high singles ranking of number 12, but I have to be honest with you, I didn't realize the significance of the Grand Slam Cup until I did a little research. That was a huge deal. The best players of the year got together. Highest prize money, 2 million. You're in $2 million. You're in Munich, Germany. You beat Michael Chang in three straight sets. Although you said afterwards you felt a little empty, but what a run! What was that like being in the middle of that whole situation? What was that like?
Well, you're right. Just qualifying for that tournament, they took the top 16 players based on how you did in that year's four major events. So, by virtue of getting to the semifinals of Wimbledon, I qualified for the Grand Slam Cup. And the Grand Slam Cup was run by the ITF, and it was meant to be a tournament in competition with the ATP Finals. And now they've kind of merged them, I think, over the years. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but they don't have the two events anymore at the end. But back then they did, and it was a big prize money event. So just qualifying for that tournament, I was just kind of excited to be there, so to speak.
Sure.
And won my first two matches and find myself in the semifinals against Michael Stich, who won Wimbledon that year, beat Becker in the final.
And he's
And
German, and you're
and he's
in
German. I'm
you're
playing him
in
in his home
Munich.
country, and Chang in the other semifinal played before me,
Okay.
and he beat Lendl. I believe it was in five sets, and the match went on forever. And we didn't, Steek and I didn't get on court till probably 9 o'clock at night for a 3-out of 5 set match, which is late. And I'm playing him in his home country, and I just played a very good match. I won 7-6, 7-6, 7-6. And
Unbelievable.
we finished at midnight, and it was a big win. And I remember going back to the hotel. This was a Saturday night. Now we're actually early Sunday morning, the early hours of Sunday morning. And as anyone knows who wins a big match, you're all pumped up and your adrenaline's going. It's hard to settle down and get food. And I probably didn't get to bed till 3 or 4 in the morning that night, and have to play Michael Chang in the final. And of course, everyone knows how tenacious of a player he is. He's
Sure.
difficult to play against under any conditions. And so I don't think I was too optimistic about how I was going to do in the final. But for whatever reason, Adam, I went out. Maybe I was just relaxed. My expectations were low. My family was there. My brother
Awesome.
Mark was offering some good coaching to stay in the moment, and went out and actually won in straight sets over
Yeah.
Michael Chang. Played just a
Unbelievable.
very, very good match. And again, back to what I said, I think in the first answer, there I am holding the Grand Slam Cup trophy. This is the biggest moment of probably biggest moment of my tennis career. And I'm not trying to say it wasn't exciting. It was super exciting, to win this big event. But I had this whiplash that took place
Sure.
holding the trophy like this on the court 10 minutes after shaking my fist in victory and shaking hands of Michael Chang. I'm standing on the court holding the trophy and looking up in the stands, and just seeing that all 14,000 people or however many people were there that day in the Olympic Hall in Munich, Germany, had just left, had gone on with their life. There's no one in the stands anymore. And I just distinctly remember thinking, wow, that really came to an end really quickly.
Sure.
And here I had just as I told you in this interview, how I had grown up and started when I was 4 or 5 years old and played
Sure,
local tournaments and then national tournaments and went to college and worked my way up on the professional tour. And I sort of reached a big moment
sure,
for me. And it was a turning point in my life. I mean, my life didn't change the next day, but it started a journey for me over the next
sure,
couple of years of just, again, trying to think about why am I doing this? What is the purpose of my life? Am I doing this just to make money, to become famous, to be successful, to win just a little more? Um, or is there something beyond that that really I'm created to do, to
sure.
do whatever you do for God's glory? He created me, you do it for his glory. And that's when I began to have some questioning in my mind of the direction I was on. And then a couple years after that is what I told you is that I was conflicted inside of me. I had grown up in a Christian home, but it wasn't my own faith. It wasn't authentic. That wasn't the priority of my life to love and serve and obey and glorify God. And through reading the Word of God, they understood the gospel and repented and believed in that gospel as we come up upon Easter next week, what
Sure.
Christ did in the cross, and that really was a turning point in my life. So it really does. That year at the Grand Slam Cup was one of the things God used to bring me to understand my need for salvation.
It's a very interesting dichotomy, and I'm not sure that it's you alone that have experienced that.
No.
I remember listening to Dominic Thiem, one of my favorite players, the beautiful one-handed backhand after he won the US Open. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think he said it just didn't give him the level of fulfillment he thought it
Mm-hmm.
would. And it's almost from the outside looking in, very hard to understand because, as you said, you've been working your whole life to achieve a goal, but yet when you get there, you're not feeling it quite the same. And I know McEnroe has talked about I think he said it's a bit easier. I don't say easy, but to get to number one, it's tough staying at number one, which is why I admire people like, the consistent like Pete Sampras for him to just year after year. So I'm not saying everyone had the same spiritual journey you did, but there are
No.
people who reach the top and then just have that emptiness.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a quote, I don't have it in front of me, by Tom Brady after he had won 3 Super Bowls. He said something very similar. It's like, is this all there is? Because ultimately, Adam, and again, I'm not downplaying how significant that win
Sure,
was or how exciting it was and how great it was and how much it really changed my life, really.
sure,
So I'm not saying that at all. It's just that, you know, things, victories, money ultimately can't bring us ultimate happiness. They can bring us some temporal enjoyment and happiness and so forth and so on, satisfaction, but ultimately they don't satisfy the deepest part of our soul. So I think that's how I maybe describe it. Like, so
sure.
thankful I won the Grand Slam Cup, an amazing win, never forget it, and yet it wasn't everything. It can't be everything in life. Life has gone on since then. Think about it. That was back in 1991. That was what, 34 years ago? There's a lot of life to be lived after that.
Sure,
There are bigger priorities in life, marriage, family,
sure,
other relationships. I mean, that life goes on, and
sure.
your victories are great for that day, but then something else starts up the next day. And so it was just very thankful that God showed me that just through an experience like winning the Grand Slam Cup, that
Sure.
that wasn't going to be able to satisfy the deepest longing of my soul.
It's fascinating. And then you go on to play Davis Cup versus Australia in 1993. And you've already talked about how much you love playing for the USA. And then you have victories over just a list of Agassi, Andre Agassi, Jimmy Connors, Stefan Edberg, Yvonne Lendl, Jim Courier, Michael Chang. Just very briefly, what challenges did each player represent for you, or one or two players? What do you remember about trying to tackle these titans of the game?
They're very good. They were better than I was. Okay, I remember that. So
Okay.
I was fortunate to get a few victories in once in a while over some of them. But let's just take someone like Stefan Edberg. I mean, he
Sure.
was just pretty magical at serving and volleying. Great feet, great hands. Didn't even have that big of a serve, big kick serve, but got to the net so quickly, volleyed so well, moved so well. Beautiful backhand again, but he was a guy that was just a great sportsmanship. Took care of his business. A great, really model player, I
Sure.
think. But there are other guys. I think you mentioned, someone like Jim Courier. I grew up with Jim, and Jim is just a tenacious, hardworking, uh, just really, really tough player. I mean, he did wonderfully well on the professional tour. I think he won four majors. So he's just a smart guy as well too. So
Sure.
he did great. He was fun to play against because we grew up together again at Bolletary. So it's those are different dynamics too. When I would play against Agassi or Courier or Chang, these are guys I grew up with. It was different playing against them
Of
than it
course.
was playing against guys like Becker, Edberg, or Lendl or so forth, or McEnroe or Connors, guys you watched playing on TV growing up.
Sure.
But each of them achieved what they did for reasons. There's certain things they did. They didn't do all play the same way.
Sure.
Same with Sampras, of course. Sampras is,
Oh yeah.
one of the best ever.
Sure.
Um, these guys had incredible strengths, both in their game and also mentally as
Mentally.
well.
Sure.
That you don't get to where they got by accident. It's a diligent day after day perseverance. It's the professional tennis tour is an amazing life and experience, but it's hard. The
Sure.
travel, the training, the injuries, the losses sometimes, the loss of
Sure.
confidence, even the winning. There's challenges in the winning. So again, very grateful to have been part of that career. It shaped my life. And so to circle back to the very beginning, to go back to the Family of the Year award, I don't play too much tennis anymore today just because physically I played a lot and my body
Sure.
doesn't
Sure.
feel
Sure.
too good afterwards. But I'm so thankful and grateful that I had the opportunity to be a part of the game for as long as I did. And it really did shape me and many members of my family.
Well, we have talked a bit about your post, I'm not even going to say your post tennis career because you're still involved in tennis and your family's involved in tennis. Um, you've hosted your own Christian Worldview radio program, written a couple of books. I'm going to talk about the other book in a moment that we haven't talked about yet. You were contributing tennis columnist for the Minneapolis Star Tribune. You're a I mean, you have kept busy and found a great life to keep you busy and contributing because obviously most of your life is after tennis versus before tennis, and that's
That's right.
difficult, very difficult for some players. So how does your book, University, let's talk a little bit about it. It's called University of Destruction, Your Game Plan for Spiritual Victory on Campus. It's the key points were the three pillars of peril, which were, I'm just going to read this: sex, drugs, and alcohol, and humanism, the non-Christian worldview. Now, this is where Florida tennis comes in. I could not make this up. Jim Martz was a mentor of mine, and here's Jim. This is our tribute issue. We lost Jim on December 30th,
Mm.
2023, unfortunately. And so I'm reading about your book, and it says you had an event at St. Andrew's School. I don't even know when this was, where you spoke about the book. And I read that there was some very good questions from the audience, including one from the 2010 Ace Awards winner and editor of Florida Tennis, Jim Martz, who was a man of faith and family. So I could see him being there and doing this. He asked you about your book and also about Agassi's book, Open. You commented that Agassi spoke well of you, but was tough on some of the other players on the tour. And then I just want to give our listeners, I saw a review of this book, which was so good. This is from, I think, a woman who was sending her child off to college. It said, I cannot recommend this book highly enough to give to high school, college-bound graduates! Exclamation point, exclamation point. This book will help prepare the college-bound student for many of the cultural and worldly pressures they will face on campus and give strategies to have victory over the temptations and clashing worldviews that will be thrown his or her way. So was that the intent of your book that she focused on there?
Very much. Let me just back up a little bit as
Sure,
to kind of
please.
why I wrote the book.
Sure.
So when I came off the tour at the end of 2001, I'd been on the tour for about 13 years, and it was just time. I was in my early 30s now, and it was time to do something else. And I didn't really know what that something else was going to be. I didn't have a plan B when I came off the tour. And so the year turned over into the beginning of 2002 and was trying to think, what should I do? What should I get involved in next? Should I stay involved in tennis primarily? I knew I really didn't want to go back into the traveling lifestyle. I had done that for so long and didn't miss being gone and on in airports and airplanes all the time and jet lag and all those things. So, and again, I think part of it's just I love Minnesota and family's nearby. I didn't want to be gone on the road all the time. So, anyway, long story short, Adam, my mom suggested to me just out of the blue one day, just completely out of the blue, have you ever thought about getting involved in Christian radio, David? And I had never thought about that. Well, Christian radio had a big impact on our family,
Sure.
on my mother. That's how she became a Christian when back in the 1950s, my grandmother as well, my father, and so forth. And it was Christian radio, whether teaching programs or music, was on very regularly in our home growing up. And so that's why my mom said it to me. She thought, oh, that would be something maybe you want to think about getting involved in. So within 6 weeks of my mom's asking me that question, I had a guy who was a local host of a local sports program here in Minneapolis. He had me on his program, and a couple weeks later, he called me and said, I want to get into a new career. How would you like to take over my radio program?
Wow.
So that just, again, providential. I wasn't even looking for it, and that door opened, and that was 23 years ago. So as a part of getting into radio, um, then the book came, the genesis of the book, the first book came around University of Destruction. As I mentioned, when I went off to college, I was a professing Christian, but it wasn't really serious to me. Um, I grew up in a Christian home, but I wasn't prepared for the type of um, opposition that I was going to receive on campus, whether in the classroom or in the dorm room,
Sure.
and didn't do well, didn't do well at all. And then, as I mentioned, when I understood what it means to be a truly authentic Christian several years later, I began to look back at that time and realize that I wasn't prepared for what I was going to face. I didn't know what I was going to face. I wasn't even thinking about what I was going to face on the campus because I wasn't the person I needed to be anyway at that time anyway. But anyway, so I wrote that book just as, again, a little bit of a memoir about what it was
Sure.
like for me to be going off to college, but just as a quote unquote game plan for a Christian who's going off to college to know what they're going to expect and how to go to college and stay and stand firm in what you believe. And so that was another a meaningful aspect of my life, being a
Sure.
part of that book and speaking a lot on that book over the years. Um, we even do an event now with the nonprofit foundation I work with that's actually not geared toward high school kids, but it's geared toward young adults, called the Overcomer course for age 18 to 28, during that very transitional time of life. And part of that life is during college. So I'm still actively involved in being a part of trying to help young people like I needed help at that particular time, to have priorities right, have the right perspectives, and be doing the right things. And so that book, University of Destruction, was a special thing for me.
Well, just a few more things about you. You're on the board of the Overcomer Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that directs your radio ministry. You served on the board of directors of the USTA from 2003 to
Mm-hmm.
2006. You're a member of the Intercollegiate Tennis Hall of Fame. We talked a little bit about your college career, which is awesome, class of 2012. USDA Northern Section Hall of Fame, Class 2005. You received the Eugene L. Scott Renaissance Award in 2011, an award presented to the national/international tennis champion who demonstrates excellence in promoting and developing the sports of tennis in public parks. And we all know how important the public parks are. Danielle Collins will always tell us that about how she grew up in the public parks playing the elder statesman, if you will, and that's how she got so good. A little more family info, and you can jump in at any time. The youngest generation of Wheatons, and correct me if I'm wrong, includes William, Winston, Daniel, and Benjamin. All played high school tennis. They volunteer, coach. They're coaches. They volunteer. Um, Marnie, Mark, and John were involved in your career. Mark served as your coach and trainer. John as your manager with IMG. John worked for IMG for a decade, managed Jim Courier, Monica Seles. John went on to become the director of tennis at the Wayzata Country Club before becoming, I like this, executive director of the Inner City Tennis Foundation. Is very important. The chapter of the USTA Foundation's NJTL network, serving in the Minneapolis area. David served 2 terms on the USTA Board of Directors, as we mentioned. Sorry, goes back through that again. And your wife, Gina, Mark's wife, Gina, I should say, and John's wife, Erin, also have ties to the sport. So there's a lot going
Yeah.
on again with the Wheaton family. And as we look to stories of resilience, I do want to show you our cover of our latest. It's Madison Keys, and I have to believe that with all you talk about that overcoming, she's been very open about some issues she's had confidence wise and mentally, that this is a story that you must embrace, the Madison Keys story, right? Winning the 2025 Aussie Open.
Yes, and I don't know her whole story.
Okay.
But I do know that the ups and downs of, like I told you just a few minutes ago, of a professional tennis player are very challenging. Most fans will turn on their TV and watch a player warm up at a tournament and then play a match, and then they don't see it's like an iceberg. They see kind of the 1% of the iceberg that's above the water, the surface, but they don't see the 99% that's underneath it, that all the time and the training and the mental side of it and the ups and downs of getting there, the mental challenges, physical challenges, everything. And so tennis play, I think tennis actually, Adam, is one of the most difficult sports. It's an
Sure.
individual sport, so you have no one to rely on but yourself. I think the only 2 sports that may be more difficult are boxing and wrestling because you're actually
Okay.
someone trying to physically beat you down.
Sure.
But tennis is a very difficult sport. You're out there all alone. It's a mental sport, one on one, and but it's great because of that too, because it's a vehicle through which, if you have the right perspective on it, focus on the journey and the right things, it can be a great vehicle for growth of your character. And so I think there's a lot of those stories in tennis.
Well, we're really nearing the end here, David, and I did want to ask your future goals, your future plans, and how people can get into contact with the organizations you support, to support those organizations and maybe just to get their own help in any way.
Yeah, well, I guess I would encourage them to visit our website for our radio program. It's thechristianworldview.org. That really is the main thing that I do nowadays.
Sure.
That's under the umbrella of this Overcomer Foundation, but it's much more. They're kind of one and the same, but the Christian Worldview is what is more well known because it's a national radio program and podcast. It can be heard on radio stations. It can be heard on your podcast app on your device. So that would be a good way for them to see what I'm involved with nowadays, and they
Sure.
can contact me through there as well. But all in all, I look back at my life, and in my life, the one thing we didn't talk about, I'll just mention this one other thing,
Sure,
Adam, is
please.
that um, I'm 55 years old. I'm coming up on 56, and last November before Thanksgiving, I had a heart attack.
Wow, I did not know that.
And yeah, it was the Friday
Sorry to hear
before
that.
Thanksgiving. Yeah. And, my dad, who we lost a few years ago, died of a heart issue at 91, died
Wow.
basically suddenly, just in his chair at home. We miss him a lot. I had a great dad,
Sorry.
and so he had heart problems. We knew we had this in my family. My brothers had a couple stents. He had a very significant, potentially significant heart situation about 8 years ago. My older brother did,
Wow.
and fortunately got stents in time. And then, I knew I had some of the heredity there, of course, but didn't see myself, uh, you know, down at the Minneapolis Heart Institute with 95% blockage in one artery, and I'm athletic and thin and reasonably good shape, and I keep active, and I don't have all the other factors, but I think genetics obviously
Sure.
can determine a lot of things. So uh, that was a wake up call for me in life, as it would be for anyone when you have a health incident like that. Again, going back to being thankful to be in a right relationship with God at that moment, knowing that if it hadn't turned out well, great hope on what would happen to me if I died. But anyway, going forward in my life, you asked about objectives or goals going forward. I don't know why, but I don't tend to set a lot of 2 year, 5 year, and
Sure.
10 year goals. Probably should, but I guess I just approach life more as, what is my duty? What's my responsibility? What does God call me to do today and this week and next week? And yeah, I have some plans for where I kind of like to go, but I try to, you just don't know what's coming at you in life. And that's part of the reason why I said that. I'm cruising along in life, and all of a sudden something like that happens, and life changes very quickly. And so just trying to do what God's called me to do. And I'm open to changing too. If something, another door opens and one closes, well, I'll have to go a different way. So just trying to be faithful with my life. I guess that is maybe the best way for me to describe it. Try to be faithful every day. Again, I don't do a perfect, good, great job of it all the time, um, but try to be um, listening to what the Word of God says and try to follow it. And that's kind of my guidebook for my life.
Well, David, I can't thank you enough for taking this much time. I know when we were talking in the past to get the interview ready, you said, "Look, it's dinner and family time," and I want to apologize to your family, and I hope your dinner did
No,
not get cold. This has been a fascinating interview, and I'll say what I said at the beginning. As impressive as your tennis career was, I really do feel as if your life now and the things you've done after your active ATP career probably have dwarfed kind of your tennis career in a very good way. So it's just been wonderful to get to know you. And I thank you so much on behalf of Florida Tennis and Bleacher Brothers Sports Network for taking the time.
no, it was an honor to be on your program, Adam, and you really did a great job preparing for this,
Thank you.
and also asking, questions beyond just the X's and O's of, kind of the glory days of being on the tennis court, some really meaningful questions. So, and I'll just say you had a lot of nice things to say about me during the interview, but I have to say that anything I am or have accomplished is really because of God's goodness in my life, because of my family, and many of the people, even outside the family, who invested so much in me. And so I've been the recipient of a lot of grace and by other people and God Himself. So I just want to deflect some of that, because I whatever I am is not just because of me. I can tell you that.
Well, David, thank you so much and go enjoy your dinner and it's just been an absolute delight. Have a good night. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, Adam.